All right, so we have a bit to get through. So I'm going to hand it over to Rao. Are you ready for the technical update?
Yes, I am. So the network status remains the same, except we're running the O12 to RC1 on the block merge testnet also. And the current work basically is continuing with the block merge. Like I said last time, the attestation messages piece was done. There's a lot of work being done in merging rev balances. This originally started as replacing per validator vaults, per deploy vaults. And then since then, it moved on to becoming directly merging rev balances. So there are different pieces to it that need to be done. And Tomislav is done with the first part of that. That's this PR 3492. The issue itself in its entirety is described in 3513 as to what all needs to go in there. There is also a piece of the work here that is changes in the proof of stake to enable the direct rev transfer. So Quantifier will be working on that, and Tomislav is finishing up the other pieces on that work. Once all of this is done and tested with the rest of the code base, then we'll be definitely ready for later full block merge, in the sense that later full block merge the code changes are already done. Leaderless block merge is continuing as we speak, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So depending on how the schedules line up, if the leaderless block merge also comes in soon, we will basically directly go to leaderless block merge on this next release, combining Tomislav's work with the rev balances merging. So what the focus of this rev balances merging work is to reduce rev merging conflicts, but also overall, this improves the speed of rev transfers anywhere in the network in any context. So that's the other benefit of taking this approach of merging rev balances as opposed to sticking with that per deploy vault and previously the per validator vault kind of a concept. So that's what's going on in that stream of work. Now, coming to leaderless block merge, NutZipper has identified some Casper changes that need to be implemented for it to work for the leaderless scenario. Also, as we began to think about block merging in the leaderless scenario, it became clear that really what we're talking about is state merging, going back all the way to whatever what Greg is calling the fringe. You can think of that as a set of previous states that have been finalized, essentially, and then being able to merge them. So what until now is thought of as block merge is now being thought of more as merging of previous states, previous finalized states, including, of course, the changes since those finalized states come into play. So this is what happens when you have, say, with the 67% stake requirement, there may be more than one previous last finalized states that may need to be taken into consideration to get through the next phase or to create the next last finalized state. So that's really what is going on there. So there's a little bit of design work that we had to do because of this rethink in the design. And we anticipate that this week that will be completed. And so overall, we're still looking at September for completion of the block merge work. But certainly there has been a little bit of redesign, both in this task and as you can see in the rev balances task. So that's the team is working intensely on all of that to move this forward. So that's where we are. We also wanted to see what we can do with performance, getting some performance data with the leader full block merge. And what Gurinder has been running some tests this week, late last week to this week, and based on some setup by NutZipper. But that setup actually is not really testing the concurrency aspects of this, meaning it is trying to do, because of the leader full scenario, sort of a sequential processing. There is, even within the current code base, there is more concurrency that can be demonstrated. So we need to redo or create a test scenario that actually addresses and tests the degree of concurrency, and then we'll be able to report some of those results. So that's where we are on that. Dennis has made good progress. He's working on re-implementing history with a new kind of Merkle tree implementation. It's called Radix tree, to gain performance there. He has gotten the basic code for the Radix tree in there. The links are in here. You can take a look at that. And he's also got written some tests for that. What he has to do now is take that and use that in the R-node history implementation, and then look at what performance gains we get. So he's proceeding with that work. So that's coming along well. I don't think in the R-node history implementation. So Tomislav is guiding him on how to make that happen, and that's going on. And the project for block merge tasks is listed there. On the hard fork 3 changes, which Quantifier has been working on for a little while, and then he was on vacation last couple of weeks. But he's back now. He'll be working, like I mentioned in the rev balances, there's a piece of rev balances work that requires POS changes. So he's going to prioritize that first so that we can move the block merge and rev balances merging forward. And then he'll get back to the hard fork 3 changes afterwards. So that's the plan as of right now. That's what I have to report on the tech update overall. Are there any questions, comments? All right, over to you, Greg.
Thank you very much, Rao. I believe that we have a demo that Bill is going to give. Is that correct?
Well, so last week we announced that we'd be doing a demo of the preliminary Arnold interface today. This is based on Raphael's work, and I believe Theo will now show us what we've done.
Okay.
Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, so there will be a demo instead of David, since he's sick and recovering. So the first thing we're getting is that we're being greeted with this pop-up where you get to choose one of 3 roles. So let's try the publishing, the attesting sequence. So we have to log in as publishing, so we just press publish. And we are logged in. So now let's upload a photo of Marilyn Monroe. So let me just grab it. And I blurred it so that nobody can see the actual photo. So don't worry. We also enter the attestation address, the address of an attester. We enter a price for this NFT, like 10,000 dust. And then we enter the name, Marilyn. And we upload. So now we wait for the block creation.
Is that a node transcript up on the right-hand side?
Yeah, it's proposing to my local instance, to
Oh,
single
got
node.
it. Okay.
It's a bit slow when I run Zoom for some reason.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I think someone's going to have to donate Theo some better hardware.
Oh, success.
All right.
Okay, now we're pressing the attester button to log in as an attester. And now we see we have a photo in our inbox, and we see it needs an attestation. So we can click on it. Obviously, we cannot see the photo. So, and we see that it's signed by the publisher. So now we can do is to attest and to make sure that it's legitimate photo and not like a knockoff copy. And we attest it and sign.
So the person that would normally attest to that would be someone like the Arnold family?
No, it will be a different entity.
So
I'm not really familiar.
attestation of assets is normally done by a third party.
Okay.
Because you don't necessarily want to publish something and then say it's real because, of course
Yeah.
you say.
Although in this case, the fact that it's actually the son or grandson of Eve Arnold might stand in for the right qualifications.
Well, and that's all an organizational thing. It's, so, I mean, they can do it whatever way they like, photographers pick their attesters, right?
Indeed. I was just trying to elucidate that for our audience.
One of the possibilities is that an attester might actually be a large market execution venue. Sotheby's tend to attest to the assets that they sell in the same way. Magnum probably do the same, but equally, you could have a member of the Arnold family attesting to something that another member of the Arnold family has uploaded.
Indeed.
Flexible. That's what we like.
Absolutely.
All right, now that the photo has been attested, we can log in as a buyer and just see if it's on the marketplace. And we see it's available. So we can see by the thumbnail and that it's verified by the attester. But currently we cannot purchase it because it's not implemented yet.
Okay.
So that's what we have so far.
Very
like
good.
A functioning attestation mechanism.
Good. And the assets are being stored on chain.
Yes, of course.
Very good. That's great.
I would like to say congratulations to the development team. We've experienced a number of difficulties lately, and everybody's kind of come together as one team to make this happen today. So a shout out to the R Publishing team.
Yeah, and to you, Bill, and to you. Heading all that up.
Indeed. Thank you for all the hard work. Any questions about the demo? Don't be shy. Please ask questions.
So we have basically now officially demonstrated assets on chain embedded with an NFT styled certificate.
Yes.
That's huge.
Of course, we were in fact doing that with RSong, but
Right. Yes.
3 years ago.
I have a question. So
Yes.
can the person who purchased the NFT with like Marilyn Monroe picture, can they resell it?
That's going to be decided by the contract that governs the asset. So there will be smart contracts that will allow for resale. There will be smart contracts that will allow for limited resale. There'll be smart contracts that allow for limited reuse, for example, in derivative works, and then smart contracts that restrict all usage.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
No, good question. Anyone else?
I see Mr. Hill's on the call. I don't know whether you had anything you wanted to ask, Steve.
Well, there's loads of questions. I don't know whether it's right for this forum.
Hey, you can ask me separately, and I'll see what I can do.
I suppose it comes around on volumes and how far away this is from a commercial point of view.
Yes. So there are two aspects to that. One has to do with bulk upload. So they're only demonstrating for demonstration purposes only a single upload, but a bulk upload action is separate, and would use a slightly different interface. In general, if you're uploading thousands and thousands of items or even millions of items, you don't want to have to hand drag and drop all of that. So it's a different experience. But they can.
So those follow-on tools are already in the planning stage.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to be ready for some time, of course. We need to figure out a standardized API. One of the outcomes here is going to be an API that allows other people to put interfaces on front of this.
Mm-hmm.
So this is our sample interface, but if somebody wanted to write a tool to upload a million images at once, the API will exist for that, and those tools will be built.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then the other side of this is provisioning an asset on chain is different than delivering the asset for consumption. So once you have the asset on chain, it's unless there's going to be a change in state, it is perfectly a regular change in state. It is perfectly reasonable to keep it up in a cache. So, for example, with RSong, we completely separated out the provisioning step with the delivery to the player. So when you have millions of people hitting, it's not a good idea to have millions of people hitting the chain just to play a song, because there's no update in the change of state. So instead, what you do is you keep the asset in a cache, like Redis, and then you make that cache, robust against failure. So, for example, you would put that underneath, over top of Kubernetes, and then what that does is that gives you the ability to have millions and millions of people read the state, and then you would only dirty the cache if there's some update to the asset. With respect to a photograph, there's not going to be any update to the asset itself. However, there might be updates to metadata. So one of the questions that I have for Bill and his team is, what are your plans for associating metadata with these assets?
So we have the answers to that in our heads. I'm not sure that we're ready to solidify them in a meeting like this.
Okay. All right.
But we do have that, and the technical discussions are being sourced out. So. Okay. Cool. So you might want to look at the way RSong was done, because when you're releasing a song, you have significant metadata. In particular, you have all the art assets that are associated with the metadata. You have all the credit assets that are associated with the metadata, and so on and so forth. So go ahead. The big issue that we're struggling with is whether or not metadata is mutable and which metadata is mutable. So, but that's what we're working through, because you are buying a non-fungible token. So in theory, the picture doesn't change, but certainly some of the data that goes along with it also doesn't. So mutable data is really what we're triggering on now. I understood. Yeah, I tend to prefer divide and conquer. So get a non-mutable solution working, and then go back and see if what a mutable solution might actually look like. Right, and that's where we're at, and that's the purpose of this proof of concept is a non-mutable solution. Awesome.
Yeah, just so that everyone on on the call understands. When we laid out the groundwork for the proof of concept, I mean, part of it was meeting the objectives of the Arnold family because they had some specific objectives. But equally, all of us had some objectives we wanted to hit too. One of those objectives was actually to tease out the things we didn't know and try and understand in more detail the things that we know we have to deal with in the future for an MVP. So, and all of that stuff, including all the stuff Greg talked about with RSong and RCAT, that's on that list, and that list is growing.
Yep, absolutely. So Steve, with respect to other kinds of asset tracking and management, these design patterns are incredibly similar. So whether one was looking at healthcare records or digital tracking of physical assets in a logistics offering, all of the design patterns are very, very similar. So hopefully that begins to answer some of your larger questions, Steve Hill.
Yeah. I think it does. There's a lot more that I'll take offline with Steve Ross Talbot.
Sounds good.
More about, getting into a commercial position into market, because I do have a queue of people who are looking for something exactly like this.
Fantastic. That's good to hear.
and importantly, and maybe this is obvious to everyone, but I'll say it anyway. The work that we are doing is certainly not specific to photos. Like Greg was saying, you put a song out here. This is a digital content platform. And we fully intend, in working with some of our partners, to put together digital rights management for access and copying rights and payments. So this is really the beginning of something quite large.
Agreed. Have you thought about which experiences might be enhanced with the delivery of sponsored content?
Steve, I'm going to defer to Steve, because I know we've had discussions around these lines, but I think Steve is better off answering this question.
So, looking at it sort of market segment by market segment. So, heritage photography is one segment, and actually overlaps with some of what Michael's provide as well. So when you look at that marketplace of heritage photographs in this instance, there's more than one player. I mean, there's a Getty Museum and other. There's a few other venues. So the way that I would kind of like to play it is, if you want to be a potentially a seller or a buyer of the assets, and you're on the platform interacting with it, then you might be coming through Magnum. But if you're getting the free version, there might be a lot of sponsored content about what else is out there in other markets. So in that way, you would hopefully create a self-sustaining ecosystem where as a buyer and as a seller, ultimately the sponsored content platform actually increases the uniformity of knowledge of buyers and sellers over time.
That makes a certain amount of sense. I think one of the things that I was thinking about is, if RChain Publishing is in control of the interface, then it makes sense for both buyer and seller experiences to offer, sponsored content. If we're serving up APIs to another marketplace, it can certainly also make sense, but we would have to somehow demarc in the delivery of the API content to the client this is the asset you wanted. This is a data that is coming with the asset that needs to be treated as somehow differently. But if we could provide a nice API there where they can choose to display the sponsored content or not, it might be a Trojan horse for getting Dazzle-like functionality into existing marketplaces.
Yeah, I mean, the sponsored content's going to be quite critical. In particular, for example, I mean, less so with Magnum, but much more so with Michael's. Because if I bought a really important image that gave me the rights to print a high quality print, let's say it only gave me the right to print one, right? I'm going to want to get that printed on a decent printer, obviously, and I'm probably going to want it mounted in a frame, right? So I think in the same way that sponsored content often adds things to our shopping spree that somehow makes semantic sense given what we're buying, you kind of want to be able to serve up the same facility. And very much in the style that you're suggesting in terms of the APIs. You don't want those APIs to be so unwieldy that it leaves the developer that's using those APIs in a situation where they're having to write more code really than they should have to. So you want the APIs to do as much work as possible and the data that's returned to be as easily understandable in terms of the classification of what is sponsored and what is not.
Yes, no, I agree. So there's a but I think this is an opportunity that Ian Bloom has pointed out repeatedly, which is that we'd like to find any and all ways that existing marketplaces could be consumers of the Dazzle APIs. So if we're able to bundle the Dazzle APIs together with the APIs that are provided with the RChain publishing, then that's a twofer. And it's just something to think about in terms of the architecture.
That's not a bad idea. I mean, if you have Dazzle APIs potentially operating on the returns from the return values that from RChain publishing, which may have additional sponsored content injected into them on their transit out, then those APIs can be wielded by the whoever's white labeling.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So then they can choose, yes. Right. So then they can choose where to place that content or not. Completely.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
But also on the request side, right? So if they don't want to receive the sponsored content, they could be sending Dazzle tokens along with the request. Right, so which would then make those clients potentially consumers of Dazzle token. You see what I'm saying?
So yeah. I mean, we're kind of digging into some technical weeds here, but to answer the question, if we look at RChain publishing and the demo that we just saw, if you eliminate the user interface portion of what you just viewed, everything still works, and the API is what this user interface uses. Anybody can write any user interface. They can do sponsored content if they wish. And we can, if necessary, there are smart contracts that we can plug into place. So the answer to your question is yes, we've thought about sponsored content. But that's not our focus right now. It's the delivery of the proof of concept.
Oh yes, no, understood. No, absolutely. What I'm referring to is when you get to the next phase, when you're designing your APIs, you could imagine that you have sort of naked RPI APIs. So these are unadorned RChain publishing APIs. And then a client consumes those, and essentially those are request response patterns for either publishing or publishing and testing or purchasing these kinds of assets.
Yeah,
Right.
and Theo and David and I have had a couple of discussions about these things, but time constraints prevent us from fleshing them out too much.
Fair enough. I mean, the conversation that we're having is also sort of we're facing our community members, and so I'm trying to suggest to our community members an expansion of the work that you've done, which I think will be very valuable to the RChain community at large, right? And so so the unadorned APIs, which obviously must sit underneath what you've got, make a lot of sense, and those could be consumed directly by or potentially directly by some other marketplace.
That is the plan.
Right. And now what I'm talking about is an enhancement of the unadorned APIs, where they are adorned with Dazzle APIs, so that when a marketplace client makes a request, for example, to upload an asset, to publish an asset, whatever confirmation they get back would come back with sponsored content, and unless they have supplied a Dazzle token. Likewise, when a buyer makes a query to find out what assets are available within the system, that would come back with sponsored content along with the assets, unless they have supplied a Dazzle token. And so you see, it's just a widening or a thickening of the unadorned APIs with a slight adornment, which is effectively the Dazzle APIs. Does that make sense, Bill?
I agree that a collaboration with Dazzle provides value.
Cool.
I think you'll find in the business model canvas in particular, Dazzle is featured.
Ah, yes, good.
And it's featured largely under the customer segment that we call the buyer. So one is based on, I'm going to use the free version, I'm going to get Dazzle sponsored content thrown at me. And the other is based on the subscription version, where I can control more precisely as a buyer whether I receive no content, or indeed whether I receive very specific content.
Excellent.
Right, and that's actually in there. It's more for the buyer, because the creator is often looking for not just a means of creating and selling their assets, they're looking for long-term storage of their assets as well. Yeah. So I haven't pinned it to that, but it is actually in the business model canvas. And that's something that we will share with the community at large when the business model canvas kind of has gone through the next iteration. In the next couple of days, probably, I'll release a movie and I'll do a voiceover of the business model canvas, so that you can understand what RChain publishing is right now, right? And roughly where we are in terms of our thinking right now. So if you think about transitioning from a POC to an MVP that's actually live, this is what the business model canvas will give you some explanation of in quite a nice way.
Excellent. This is all great, and I appreciate you bearing with me and allowing me to ask all these silly questions. Any other comments?
You're leading the witness, Greg.
I've been found out. Sorry, Your Honor.
Lawyers never do that.
Indeed. All right then. Any other questions for the POC team?
There's a question in the chat from GSJ, I think Gurinder. So why not build upon RSong?
It's simply what we needed to achieve for the POC was less than RSong, right? And actually taking the RSong software would have taken, the POC's not taken much in terms of resource, really. It would have taken too long, given it's only a proof of concept. If it was an MVP, right, then RCAP would be used, which is the basis of RSong. And that is the intention. It's been on our list of things to look at, but the focus had to be, we need to deliver a demonstrable proof of concept that we can wrap up and take with us. The idea is that we can walk into Magnum's offices with an Android phone and show them this thing running on our own shard, right? It's not live in the sense we're not actually really selling or buying these assets, but it will be engaging enough for them to think, holy shit, holy crap, these guys are serious, right? And from there, the aim is to raise money that enables us to deliver that first MVP. And it is a pure guess right now, but what I'd be looking to see from an MVP would be something that we can fit into, because I'm time boxing it. I need an MVP out in 6 months, maybe 7 months from now, right? Live.
So I'm gonna add to what Steve just said, and I'm gonna say that to sum up, in my mind, to sum up what Steve said was, it needs to be cheap and fast.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. But also, we have to realize that we're working with a real customer here. This is the Arnold family, and they have requirements that we need to meet. And so we are paying extra special attention to the Arnold family. We're paying extra special attention to Magnum, which they want us to pay attention to. And now with Michael's coming forward, soon we're going to be paying attention to the Michael's requirements. So the staffing requirements and the knowledge requirements and the money requirements to reuse RSong, I believe, would be prohibitive.
For the POC, definitely would have been.
Yes, for the POC.
None of you would have seen anything running today if we'd done that.
Let's explain why. The reason why is because RCat was written in basically a previous version of it's now a 1.5 year old version of RChain, and so what would have to happen is to update a bunch of the Rholang code, and this team found that spelunking through Kayvon's code was less productive than just starting from scratch. And this is often
absolutely this is
often a decision that the development team have to make, right? To get going, they start from scratch. Once they get going, then they understand the whole space end to end, and then the spelunked code will make a lot more sense and it'll be easier to update.
So it's highly likely post the POC, when we start looking at the MVP and start doing our investigative work for an MVP, it's highly likely at that point RCat and other things that we have in our repository of donations or suggestions of things we should look at, that's when we'll start looking at them. We'll do a spike, we'll do the technical spike, we'll start looking at them in depth and examining what we should move forward and use and what we shouldn't. But rather than do that now at this point, it would have cost us more money, more resource, and very importantly, it would have cost us time, because we need to build a head of steam out there in the marketplace in order to oddly enough, get the investment to create this MVP platform in the first place, and that has to then be spun out of ultimately out of the co-op. The co-op may continue to have an interest in it, an equity stake in it, but it's not what the co-op's supposed to do, right? So this is a way of showing to the rest of the world, in some respects, that you can build very serious applications that do some pretty serious shit on top of RChain. So never let that be forgotten. That's kind of why we focused in the way that we are.
So NFTs didn't really exist with RSong. Now, are you using the NFT code for Rholang code for this, or That's
So-
true also.
Okay. So that's one of the things that we had to consider when we first started putting this together. Is this an NFT platform? Is this an asset platform? Or is this just a playground? Right. Well, we decided it wasn't a playground because we're actually going to, spend money. But the work that you've seen today is based on Raphael's work with NFTs, which we saw demoed last week. And that work is sufficient to accomplish the proof of concept. And that is the reason we selected it. That we have to mint NFTs here. And Raphael's work is good for doing that. Does that answer your question, Jim?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, folks. I really appreciate it. Good work. And probably time to move on since we've only got about 15 minutes before the top of the hour. Daryl, are you ready to give the week in review?
Yes, I am. Hey, everybody. So here's the week in review for Thursday, August 26th to today, September 1st. On Thursday in the governance committee call, we discussed nomination committee particulars, monetary policy compared to other chains, and did some discussion around getting investment interest in dApps wanting to build on RChain. On Friday in the climate coordination RCast, we discussed 1 billion children at risk of climate shocks, how an entire town coordinated a move to high ground, media's role in climate denial over the years, and Greg gave an exciting CBC Casper update. On Monday in the Casper Standup, this week's Casper Standup covered an update on an interpretation of the universal and existential quantifiers in QCAT. It also covered a high-level overview of the Danvey correspondence between continuation passing evaluators and abstract machines with an application to deriving a correct by construction bytecode machine for Rholang. And you'll be quizzed on that tomorrow. Also on Monday in the RDev member co-op planning, development of chat live coding, my RChain wallet, RVote 2021, Shamir backup of Liquid Democracy Rev account keys. Yesterday in the communications working group, there was not one because I was in the middle of moving frenzy. And this morning in the RChain active member hangout, Jim and Gary were looking at the chat implementation that they're working on Saturday. New chat, send chat, and rechat. Bill explained it to me that what they're working on is kind of like a user interface that people can build a JavaScript-based user interface on. So it's a Rholang user interface to build user interfaces with. Then we discussed chronic pain in Bill and Jim, which somehow led to a discussion around modeling chemical interactions in aquariums, which of course led to Greg's talk of modeling chemical reactions on RChain. Then they explained to me how Rholang is actually a simple language, but it requires a shift in how to think because of its non-sequential concurrent nature. Then Jim demonstrated a rock, paper, scissors in parallel game in Rholang where results are happening at the same time, which blew my mind. And that brings us to now.
Thanks very much, Daryl. Any questions for Daryl? I just want to point out that that right after the Casper talk, so just so people know the context, Atticbee approached me about doing a bytecode machine for Rholang. Typically, for whatever reason, bytecode interpretation gives you a significant speed up. We found that with Rosette as well. But the problem is that you can run into bytecode injection attacks, right? I mean, this is one of the criticisms I've had about Ethereum for a long time. Without some proof of the correctness of the compiler for each different client, it is possible for any one of those clients to inject bytecode associated with the compilation of the Solidity code that squirrels away dust into adversarial addresses, right? So those clients are not secure without those proofs of correctness. So the point is that if we're going to have a bytecode compilation for Rholang, then it needs to come with a proof of correctness so that you can point to the proof and say, nope, not possible for this to be doing bad things with rev addresses. And so rather than to have that proof be post facto, so you build the bytecode machine and then you build the compilation, then after the fact you do the proof of correctness. The principles that inform RChain are correct by construction. So the question is there a way to automatically derive the bytecode machine from the semantics for Rholang? And it turns out that that Danvi has a recipe. I wouldn't yet call it a functor, but it is certainly a recipe whereby if you are given a continuation passing style evaluator, so think about a Lisp interpreter written in Lisp that is in continuation passing style, then he can calculate from that evaluator an abstract machine. And so he goes through several examples in one of the basic research in computer science, the BRICS reports. And I walked the folks in the Casper Standup through that. Now this is the old RChain serendipity. Strange. Right after that call, I had a call with Mike Stay, in which out of the blue he demonstrated for me a implementation in K framework of an abstract machine for Rholang. So he finally completed it after many years, and gave me the demonstration. So I got to see it running. So he is threatening to do a pull request to give us the code. I imagine that he will get around to it when his schedule allows. But so we do have a K framework specification which does exactly that, provides an abstract machine for Rholang. Now, interestingly, it follows a different design pattern than the one specified by the Danvi recipe, but it should be possible to adapt their implementation to go from the abstract machine, the register machine, to a bytecode machine. So now there are two paths available for potentially speeding up the execution of Rholang. So I thought that was quite intriguing. I don't know if any of that made sense to folks or if it was just word salad for lots, hopefully for those in the know that they should be excited. All right, so please submit your items of business by September 24th if you want them to be considered for the ballot by the board. There's Ian has placed in the chat the data associated with that. Please don't hesitate if you something you want the co-op membership to vote on. Please get those items of business drafts in place so that we can get them reviewed, and for those that pass muster, put them on the ballot. Any questions before we sign off?
I just want to mention the place to place those requests is the AGM-2021 channel on the Discord, RChain Discord.
Yeah, it's in the chat.
Was Ian going to do
I can do a quick election coverage if you like.
Please,
yeah.
please.
Okay, so the RChain cooperative board is configured to have 9 directors. And that would be 3 with a 3-year term, 3 with a 2-year term, 3 with a 1-year term. So the directors are staggered. And this is the current configuration of the board. And in our election, we're going to be electing 4 new directors. So that will be directors to, I'll outline it here. So we're going to have 3 directors that will serve for 3 years, and then we're going to have 1 director that's going to serve for 1 year, is the way it's going to work out. So we'll have a rank order vote on October 24th. Those 3 candidates that have the most votes will all win 3-year terms, and then the one who scores 4th in the ranking will win a 1-year term. So right now we have 3 incumbents that are running for another term. Those are Evan, Daryl, and Eric Meng, who resigned earlier. And in addition to that, we have 5 new candidates who will be revealed on September 28th when the board writes up the ballot. So we will have 8 candidates competing for 4 board seats. So any questions on any of that?
Potentially 8.
Right, potentially. So they have to be screened by the nominating committee and balloted by the board on September 28th.
Thank you. I thought that was exceptionally clear. I am very, very excited by the level of engagement. I think it's super encouraging to have so many people running for seats on the board. It means that we're starting to get some significant involvement from the community.
Yeah, and our nominating committee this year has 8 members, and we've already sent out scheduling offer to all of our nominees, and so we will begin the interview process later this week.
Fantastic. I also want to express my gratitude to the nominating committee. I know they've been working quite hard to work through the candidates and to deal with all the practical problems of being able to ballot candidates, because these are non-trivial. While there are many candidates that we know, in general, we do have to be fairly disciplined and rigorous about things like background checks. If we begin to lax our standards now, then they will be lax later and more lax as we go on. So the process of making sure that we're not putting known felons on the ballot is is an important process.
Has there been a consideration of increasing the number of board members?
Board seats? Yeah. So it's an interesting idea. I find that it is difficult enough to coordinate 9. Increasing the number of board seats to means that the logistics of the board begins to outweigh the advantages of the collective intelligence. But other people's mileage may vary. It will also require I believe that the number of board seats is carved into the bylaws, which means it would require a fairly, I'm not sure whether it would require a membership vote or just a board vote. I have to review that.
I think that the bylaws require 3 directors, and I think it's the board can determine whether they want to expand.
Okay. I'll have to review that. I know that when Evan and I talked about it, I recommended 9, and I thought that's what we put in the bylaws. But you may be right. You may be right. All right. Anything else we need to cover in the last minute?
I would like to say, to repeat myself, that I give huge kudos to Theo and especially David Asamanya for the work that they've done over the last week to make today's demo possible. They have outdone themselves, and I just wanted to make that clear to everyone.
Agreed. Thank you to the whole team. All right, please stay safe, stay cool, and see you folks on the other side.